The Holy Gospel according to St. Luke, the 17th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
On the way to Jerusalem, Jesus was going through the region between Samaria and Galilee. As he entered a village, 10 lepers approached him. Keeping their distance, they called out, saying, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." When he saw them, he said to them, "Go and show yourselves to the priests." And as they went, they were made clean. Then one of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned back, praising God with a loud voice. He prostrated himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him. And he was a Samaritan. Then Jesus asked, "Were not 10 made clean, but the other 9? Where are they? Was none of them found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner?" Then he said to him, "Get up and go on your way. Your faith has made you well." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord.
Well, good evening. It is the third week in our stewardship theme, our focus of Hope Abounds. So the last few weeks we've been looking at the different ways that hope is alive in our community, and how hope is that foundational pillar in our lives as Christians, that we hang on to the hope we have in God because of what God has done in our world and in our lives. And because of that hope, the hope of the gospel, we live radically different lives. We live lives that are oriented differently in the world. And today we're exploring the theme of what gratitude has to do with our generosity. Because hope abounds, because God has fashioned a world in which we might find hope, then our response is to live a grateful life. So we're exploring that theme of gratitude tonight. But before we do that, pop quiz time. Are you ready for a pop quiz? No? Ruth is shaking her head. No. What does today's gospel reading, Luke chapter 17, what does it have in common with another story in Luke that's found in chapter 10, the parable of the Good Samaritan? You all know the Good Samaritan? We preached it a few weeks ago. What does today's gospel in Luke 17, the cleansing of the 10 lepers, what does that have to do? What does it have in common with a crowd favorite, the Good Samaritan? You know the one, the man in the ditch, and the priest passes by, and the Levite passes by, but then the stranger passes by, has mercy on him, takes him, puts him up in an inn, gives the innkeeper money, promises to make whole any expenses that are accrued in caring for this stranger, right? The age-old question, who is my neighbor? What do these two stories have in common? It's not a rhetorical pop quiz. What do you think? Yeah. She said the Samaritans are the heroes. They're the good guys. They're the ones that Jesus very intentionally wants us to focus on. Samaritans. Who were they? It's a complicated history. They're Yahweh worshipers, which is what we should note first and foremost. These are not people of a different belief in God. They believe in the same God as the Israelites, but they believe slightly different things about that God. They have different religious practices compared to the Israelites that worship in Jerusalem at the temple. There's an ethnic difference between the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. They have a long history that traces it, you can trace back to the falling of the temple. It's a complicated history. But what we need to know and focus on is that they were considered an enemy of most of the faithful Jewish people. They were not liked. The crowd in which Jesus is doing ministry, he's traveling in between this region, right? In between Samaria and Galilee. He's sort of in no man's land. And in this group of 10 lepers, we're told that one of them turns back to thank Jesus, to give praise to God for the healing that he received. And wouldn't you know it, the one who thanks Jesus was a Samaritan, right? These are little details that that can seem like nothing to us, because honestly, unless we really learn the history and focus on it, these details, they don't affect our lives, right? But this is a radical thing Jesus is highlighting here, that the author of the Gospel of Luke is highlighting. That it was the enemy, quote unquote, of the people, the one that most people would have disdained, wouldn't want to talk about. It's that character that Jesus points out. This one came and gave praise and gave worship. The same is true in the story of the Good Samaritan, right? That it's the Samaritan. It's the foreigner. It's the one that the people would look down upon, would speak ill of. That's the hero in the story. Now, how else are these two connected? Samaritan is the hero. In the story of the Good Samaritan, it's an example of loving who? You shall love your neighbor, right? It's a story of neighborly love. The outcast, the one that was on the margins, is the hero in this story of loving neighbor. And now in the story of the 10 lepers, the one who was healed, the Samaritan, he comes back, and what does he do before Jesus? He throws himself on the ground. He begins to praise and worship and adore Jesus. It's a story of the Samaritan showing that he loved God. So taking both of these together, what comes to mind for me is the greatest commandment that Jesus taught. When pressed by the Pharisees and those who were scribes of his day, what is the greatest commandment, Jesus? What did he tell them? You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your strength, all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. I love this Jesus of hearts. Because all throughout the Gospels, he's doing these little subversive things, isn't he? These two stories in Luke's Gospel, separated by just a few chapters, highlight that loving God and loving neighbor, it doesn't matter what ethnic background you come from. It doesn't matter what line that people have drawn in the sand. Anyone can do that. Anyone. And whoever does that, God finds favor.